Among our many special guests here today is someone who helped bring about the space age. He's a space pioneer, not in the building of rockets or spacecraft, but in the imagining of them and the other ways we might experience the vast cosmos around us. About the same time that JPL was coming into being many years ago, just a few miles away here in Los Angeles, this pioneer was in the process of becoming one of our nation's most gifted writers. He's one of those writers whose writing has changed the way people think. He has more than 500 published works exemplifying the American imagination at its most creative. His best-known works, The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, Fahrenheit 451, and Something Wicked This Way Comes are masterpieces. He is one of the truly classic authors of our time. Please join me in welcoming Ray Bradbury.
When I was very young, I lived in Waukegan, Illinois, next to one of my favorite uncles, and he had all the Martian books of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I used to go over to his house and borrow these books and take them home and read them. When I was 12 years old, I decided I was going to be a writer. I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I lived on Lowell Avenue. You can't do better than that, can you? I loved Percival Lowell and the drawings of Schiaparelli, and I fell in love with Mars. I read a book, The Gods of Mars, by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and it needed a sequel, but I didn't have the money to buy the sequel. So when I was 12 years old, I wrote the sequel to The Gods of Mars. That's the very first thing that I wrote about landing on Mars and saving Dejah Thoris, the wife of John Carter. So that you see, my life has been spent on Mars from the very first. And when I was in my teens and when I was 30 years old, I published The Martian Chronicles. And Aldous Huxley, the great English writer, called me to his house one day for tea when I was 30 years old. And he said, "Mr. Bradbury, do you know what you've done? Do you know what you are?" I said, "What am I?" He said, "You're a poet. You're a poet. You've written about Mars. But it's poetry. For God's sake, this book is going to be around forever." And to have Aldous Huxley, the writer of Brave New Worlds, say this to me, I couldn't believe it. Because I didn't realize all during my 30s I was writing about the future so completely. I was so madly in love with Mars. So many years later, I came out to Jet Propulsion Lab when we had the first landing, and in March of 1971, and I stayed up all night watching the screen, waiting for the films to come on, projecting our first images of Mars. And I noticed a man standing behind me. I was afraid to speak to him at first, but I finally did. He was Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun is the two halves of the destiny of man. He is the living metaphor of the dark and the light. He's the man that invented the V-2 rocket that destroyed London and killed people, but he's also the man that helped invent the rocket to take us to the moon and to take us to Mars. So I called him over, and he signed an envelope for me, and I have it here. And he spoke well of me and the influence of my book on his being an inventor of the rocket. So he was there all night with me, the night of our first landing on Mars. In the early morning, the first images began to come through to us of the planet Mars. And at noon, the ABC TV people put me on TV to interview me about this landing. And Roy Neal, the announcer, said to me, "Mr. Bradbury, how does it feel that we've landed on Mars and there are no cities there and there are no Martians?" I said, "You are ridiculous. The cities don't count. It's the Martians that count. And from this day on, we are the Martians." No. So I said, "Shut up and get the hell out of here." And I told Roy Neal to go to hell because I was there weeping. I cried all night long. It was wonderful. And then back in 1969, I was in London the night we landed on the moon. And David Frost asked me to come over to his show to be interviewed on TV, to be seen by millions of people, to celebrate the landing on the moon. So I got there at 8:30 at night in July, and we landed on the moon, and David Frost made fun of the whole thing. Macmillan, the Prime Minister of London, was on, and David Frost made fun of him. And he made fun of the astronauts stepping out of the rocket, or getting ready to step out and land on the moon for the first time. And around 8:45 that night, he said, "Now I'm going to introduce to you a great American talent. He's going to speak about landing on the moon." And he said, I thought he was talking about me. He said, "And here he is, Engelbert Humperdinck." I said, "Jesus Christ. Engelbert Humperdinck, how stupid can you get?" So I ran out of the television room. I ran out in the parking lot, and the producer followed me and said, "What are you doing out here?" I said, "I'm leaving the show. That man is a stupid idiot. He doesn't realize this is the greatest night in the history of mankind. We've been waiting for millions of years to go to the moon, and we're here now. He should be celebrating. Get me a taxi cab. Get me out of here." So I drove across London, and I appeared on a show with Walter Cronkite at midnight on Telstar, seen by millions of people. And I spoke of how I felt about landing on the moon. It was a fantastic broadcast. I brought a copy with me tonight, and you'll see it in a moment. But when I was done with that broadcast, instead of taking a cab back to my hotel in London, I walked across London all night long. The night we landed on the moon, I wept with joy. I couldn't believe I was only 48 years old. I thought I would be an old man. I thought I'd be 80 or 90 when we landed on the moon. Here I am, only 48. I couldn't believe it. It was wonderful. So in the morning, I got to my hotel. There's a tabloid newspaper out in front. I looked, it said, "Neil Armstrong walks on the moon at dawn," and the headline above is, "Bradbury walks at midnight." Isn't that great?
Is it? You done? One more minute?
Now they'll do the right.
Yeah? You got like a minute?
What?
You got a minute more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You finish?
Yeah, I want them to put the film on.
Oh,
Go.
I want you to
Okay,
see.
it will be showed later?
it'll be shown later.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Ray Bradbury. Our keynote speaker today is an Emmy Award-winning 26-year broadcast news veteran who successfully melded a talent for telling complex stories in accessible terms with a lifelong passion for aviation, space, technology, and the environment. Working for nearly 17 years as a correspondent, anchor, and producer at CNN in Atlanta and New York, he has focused the leading edge of research and development. Known for his unparalleled coverage of space exploration, he led CNN's coverage for the past 17 years, including the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia in February 2003, reporting live for 16 straight hours. That accident scuttled the deal he had just brokered with NASA to make him the first journalist to fly in the space shuttle. He's an experienced instrument-rated pilot and an airplane owner, and has leveraged that insight and knowledge into unrivaled television coverage of aviation. Helping us now to appreciate the momentous impact of the Mars Exploration Rover mission, please welcome Miles O'Brien.
Great to be here. How are you all?